webinar. We want to make sure that we facilitate information to our business community. We at the city, Ruth Martinez, Michelle Garrett, and I are represented on this webinar, but we're a local resource on local issues. So we want to make sure you have our names, but ultimately many of these opportunities for funding are coming from the feds and the state. So the Small Business Development Center is a great resource for that, and we're very happy to have Don Lowell and Laura with us today representing that organization. We want to make sure that you are connected with what they have to offer. And with that, Don, I want to push it back to you, and thank you again for providing us with this information.
Thanks, Eric. Really appreciate you having us. And I'm going to share my screen. Jump right into it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So again, welcome everyone. And thank you, Michelle and Ruth and Eric. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. We really value the partnership that we had over the years with the city of Pasadena.
Oh, and, Don, your microphone is a little muted. There you go.
How's that?
Yeah, better.
I'll try to speak up. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
Let me know if that happens again.
Okay.
So jumping right in, we are the SBDC at PCC, and with me today, in addition to Laura Nystrom, is Larry Johnson, who's one of our advisors, as well as the Assistant Director of the SBDC at El Camino. And I'd like to start by talking a little bit about SBDC and what we do. We are a resource partner of the SBA. Many of you are familiar with our sister organizations as well. The Women's Business Center, SCORE, and the Veterans Business Center are a couple of examples. And what we do at the SBDC is we provide consulting and resources for small business owners. Our job is to help you start, succeed, and grow, and it's also to help you recover. We are grant funded, so our consulting is always at no cost, and we like to say it's no cost and no catch. We're hosted. I also want to provide a quick shout out to our host, PCC. For those of you who may not know, PCC is the #1 city college in the state on several measures. It's also one of the top 10 in the nation. And I would encourage you as business owners, if you're looking for employees or interns, I would highly recommend you check out the Freeman Center online at PCC. They're doing some amazing things. They've got great students. I would encourage you to check them out. Really appreciate our host at PCC. So let's jump into it. This presentation is going to be on 3 key areas. The 2 stimulus loan packages that are available. And then I also want to talk a little bit about the SBA debt relief that's available. Just to provide a little background, about 2.5 weeks ago, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan was released. And this is a disaster loan provided directly from the SBA. These are US Treasury funds. Typically, the SBA provides lending through a variety of lending partners, banks in particular. But for disasters, they loan money directly. And that's what the EIDL was launched as, again, about 2 weeks ago. Now, with the CARES Act that came out, they built a new program into that called Paycheck Protection Program. I'm sure you've all heard about it by now. It launched on Friday. And these loans are funded through traditional SBA lending partners. So there's a key difference between those two programs. And I'd like to start by sharing that with you. The EIDL was launched initially to provide operating expenses, working capital to help you get through the disaster. Paycheck Protection is just that. It provides payroll support for you and for your employees. And then the bridge loan and the debt relief are for existing loan holders. And we'll wrap up with a comment about that. As a quick piece of housekeeping, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. Those we don't get to, we're going to roll up and provide answers and forward them on to Michelle and Ruth. So let's talk about the EIDL. It's easy just to call it an EIDL. Again, these are working capital funds to keep your business operating. You can use these funds on things like fixed debt, COGS, AP. You may not use these to refinance debt, but certainly can use them to make payments on your debt. This loan amount can be up to $2 million at 3.75% for 30 years. And there's an 11-month deferment. Notice that the interest does accrue on this loan, but you don't need to make a payment for a year. So who's eligible? Very typically, the SBA designation of employees or number of employees below 500. Please note that your independent contractors don't count in that count. Corporations, sole proprietors are all eligible. Ineligible would include religious, illegal, gambling concerns, as might be expected. What are you going to need? First of all, you'll need to be able to show that you can repay the loan. So they will look at your credit score and your history, and they will pull a credit report. You'll need to provide information for any owner above 20%, your COGS, your operating expenses, and the number of employees. The COGS and operating expenses would be the prior 12 months up to the end of January. So they're going to take a look at the average monthly operating spend, and they're going to calculate for you an amount of that loan. They will also ask you for your employee count at that time. Again, do not count independent contractor. As for guarantees and collateral, there's no personal guarantee required up to $200,000. Loans over $25,000 will require collateral. However, it's not required to get the loan. The SBA will ask you to pledge what you have, but they will not decline you just because you don't have collateral above $25,000. So how do you apply? Those of you who applied for this loan when it first came out are aware of the fact that there have been 3 iterations of this application. The first one that launched was an online website portal, received almost 1 million applications in the first week and crashed. They then switched to a Dropbox program where you uploaded paper forms, and then shortly thereafter, as of 30th, they rolled out this new portal, which is much, much easier to use. And you'll see the link there on the screen. Note that the deadline for applying is the end of the year for an EIDL loan. It's different for Paycheck Protection, so I want to point it out. You may also FedEx or mail paper forms directly to the SBA. We have several clients who did that. You will not get an immediate confirmation, but it's one option for you. So I also want to chat about the EIDL Advance. Some of you may have heard of this as a grant, referred to as a grant. We'll talk a little bit about that. The EIDL Advance allows you to get up to $10,000 much more immediately while you're waiting on the EIDL loan. Please notice it says up to $10,000. To have access and to be considered for this $10,000, you need to use the new portal, and you need to check this box and provide your banking information. If you applied before March 30th, please make sure you resubmit your app through this portal. And if you'd like to be considered, check this box. Note that even if you do not get approved for an EIDL loan, you may receive this advance. And this advance is forgiven if you're declined for an EIDL loan and if you spend it on allowable expenses, primarily payroll, rent, utilities. We'll talk more about that here in a second. The goal and the objective for this was that it would be sent within 3 days of you're doing the application. I can tell you that we have not heard reports of clients receiving an advance that quickly. So please understand that that's the goal, and as they ramp up the program, there are some delays. But it's a really nice part of the EIDL loan intended to get you some cash as soon as possible. So now let's talk about Paycheck Protection. This program, as I mentioned, is through the traditional SBA lending partners. It launched on Friday. Those lending partners had about 5 to 7 days previous to that to learn about the program, create their own program, and launch it. And so in my mind, we're on day 3 of Paycheck Protection, and it's an enormous program. The goal of Paycheck Protection is to help you keep your workforce employed. And it's going to ask you to provide information on your payroll, including your benefits and wages, tips, retirement investments. Also for things like rent and utilities. Please note, this loan may only be used for those allowable expenses. The EIDL loan has some flexibility. This loan must be spent on those expenses. This is a $10 million, up to $10 million loan at 1% APR for only 2 years. It's a short-term loan. And the deferment on PPP is 6 months, also with interest accruing. Eligibility, quite a bit similar. In this case, independent contractors may apply. If you have independent contractors, you do not count them as part of your payroll. They apply on their own. Startups who've had payroll expenses may also apply as well. In terms of ineligibility, if you've had a default on a federal loan in the last 7 years, you would not be eligible. What are you going to need? First of all, a lending partner. Encourage everyone to start with your business bank. We will be providing a list or a link to a lender search where you can find other options, but please start with your business bank. There is an SBA application form, and you'll want to pull together the information that's pretty typical of an SBA loan. W-2s, 941s, your financials, tax returns. Each bank will provide you with their list, but that's some basic info that you can start to pull together. This loan does not require any personal guarantees or collateral, which is fantastic and much different than a typical 7A SBA loan. How to apply. So here's the link, and I'll put it in the chat as well, to find SBA lenders. But again, you should start with your business bank. Please understand they're getting millions of requests in the last 3 days. I'm sure most of you have heard about it. I can tell you that the SBA is adding lenders, and as time goes on, it will be easier to find a lending partner to apply. Today, I can appreciate it's probably pretty frustrating, but I do expect that to loosen up as the program moves on. Notice this application deadline is June 30th. These funds are for the immediate future. So how do I know how much I can borrow? What they're going to do is they're going to take your average monthly payroll costs. They're going to, by the way, cap those at $100,000 for any individual employee. They're going to divide it by 12 to get an average monthly cost and multiply it by 2.5 to come up with a loan amount. If you have a seasonal business, you may use specific months from 2019 to come up with that average. But typically, most folks are going to look at the 12 months ended January 31st. On the right, you're going to see some of the things that are included in these costs. Anything associated with salary or similar compensation, vacation, medical leave, insurance, retirement benefits, All of that you'll add up to come up with this monthly average. Here are a couple of quick examples of what your maximum loan would look like. If your annual payroll is $3 million, you'll have a loan max of $625. So let's talk about the loan forgiveness. And we'll start in the middle. The expenditures are specific. They're payroll, benefits, wages, obviously rent, and utilities. You may also spend the money on interest from your business mortgage. There's what I'm referring to as a 75% rule. At least 75% of your expenditures must be made to payroll and benefits for the loan to be forgiven. Please make sure you're paying attention to that. And your lender will help you with that. Notice also, these expenses must take place during an 8-week period, excuse me, from the origination of your loan. So you must spend this amount right away. Now on the left, talking about forgiveness. Can that be reduced? Yes, it can. If you don't bring back all of your employees, or you bring them back at a lesser wage, that may impact the forgiveness. Now the good news is as long as you bring them back by June 30th, you should still be eligible for 100% forgiveness. So real quick, I wanted to also talk about the debt relief program. And this is for those of you who currently have a federal loan, either a 504, 7A, FHA, and I believe guaranteed student loan also are included. As of March, the next 6 payments on those loans are being made for you by the SBA. You don't need to apply for this. It's automatic. And they're picking up the entire payment, principal, interest, everything. If you already mailed a check or made a payment, you can opt to have that applied to the loan, or you can ask them to send it back to you, and they will. So again, this is automatic for those of you who currently have federal loans. The Express Bridge loan is also available to you folks. That's up to $25,000. It's an expedited process, and you'll want to see the lender where you have your current loan to learn more about that. And finally, we're here to help. We have 15 advisors and some staff working really, really hard to answer all your questions. Whether it's loan related or not, we do have advisors available as well for anyone who's interested in working on a recovery strategy. Those of you who may be thinking about selling online or creating a new strategy for your recovery, we have folks who can help you. I will say the best way to reach us is via email. You're welcome to call, but email will get you in the queue, and we should be back to you within a day or so to begin the process of answering your questions. And with that, I think we'll take a look at some of the questions and go from there. Michelle or Eric, was there anything that I missed in that while I'm pulling that up?
I think this was a pretty thorough overview, pretty streamlined and straightforward. As you're pulling up the chat questions, I do want to mention to everybody who's joined us today that we will have a webinar encore link, so that way you can view this later and on your own time. And we will work to get a copy of the PowerPoint deck that Don is working off of and make sure that you guys have access to that as well. Eric, anything else?
No, that's a good comment. Yeah. And we want to make sure that even though we might have only limited time for questions now, all of us are available as follow-up thoughts emerge from the group.
Don, you'll notice that I have attempted to answer questions in the chat box. There are a couple ones that have come in just recently that I have not touched on, so you may want to start from the bottom.
Great, thank you. I did see one that looks like you. Oh, here's one. I had to lay off my small staff. Do I still qualify for Paycheck Protection for when they return? Martha, that's a great question, and that's exactly what Paycheck Protection is for. You definitely want to apply for that loan and bring them back to work as quickly as you can. And if you do and spend 75% or more of the loan on that payroll cost, it will be forgiven. The loan will be forgiven. So even if you've already laid them off, you definitely want to apply for that loan and bring them back.
But
hey,
one
Don,
thing.
I was going to say, there was a question about what if you don't hire back 100% of your staff? Say you only hire 30%. What does the loan forgiveness look like in that scenario?
Larry, you want to?
Yeah, you'll get credit for whatever money you spend that you pay out according to the acceptable payroll expenses. So if indeed 30% does not cover the entire amount of the payroll for employees you used to have, but it covers the entire amount of the borrowed amount, you won't be penalized because you didn't bring anybody back. You've spent the funds on employees.
Great.
And do you count retirement contributions as part of payroll costs?
Yes.
And what if the EIL, the EIDL application didn't have a section about how much of a loan you want? What if you only want to apply for the 10K grant? Do you have to apply for the whole loan?
So let me say that's a great question. And to access the grant, you do need to apply for the EIDL loan. Now, when they approve you and contact you, then you'll decide whether or not you want to move forward with that loan. If you choose not to and spend the $10,000 or up to $10,000 on allowable expenses, it will be forgiven. So you're not tied to take the loan if you're approved, but that process is the only way to access the advance.
But I think it's important that you catch the subtlety in Don's comment. If you're approved, the $10,000 reverts to, or up to $10,000 reverts to a loan. It only becomes a gift from your uncle if you are denied. There's a question here about idle for small businesses with no employees. You are eligible to apply for idle whether or not you have employees. So solopreneurs, single member LLCs can apply for idle. The questions you answer relate to your revenues for 2019 and your cost of goods sold for 2019. And then there's another question in the application, the initial application, for your total operating expenses for 2019.
You answered quite a few of these, Larry. Any others that?
There's one on laying off employees. If you didn't lay off any employees, do you still qualify? The answer is yes.
And you can apply for both idle and.
Yes. Yes.
Had one question emerge this week from a company in Pasadena that's maybe 15 employees, but they're venture capital backed. So they are asking questions about whether they're eligible for some of these programs.
Don, would you like me to take that?
Yeah, please.
Okay, that is the one hiccup in the system. Right now, VC-backed businesses are not covered. Other affiliated, so that it falls under the affiliation rules. Now they have carved out affiliation rule options for franchisees. They are eligible, but right now, unless Congress gives some relief or there's an interpretation from the SBA that it was Congress's intent to include them, they're not. But it is being looked at by the SBA, and we'll have a further word on that for you hopefully soon. We have a call this afternoon that we get 3 times a week where an SBA representative is on the phone to answer our questions. So we'll ask for an update on that issue.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question about asking me to clarify on the advance and the idle. So let me try that again. You do not need to be approved for the idle loan to be approved for the advance. You may get the advance and then be declined for the idle. Go ahead, Larry.
There's another question, Don, from Tina Williams, that her bank told them that they were ineligible because they did not have a credit card with them, and they've been a customer of the bank for over 15 years.
I believe earlier she said it was Bank of America also.
Yeah, there have been wrinkles with the major banks. I must confess, the major banks have, in many instances, balked about for a variety of reasons that we won't go into over this call. But they have been resisting and have set up roadblocks. It's very unfortunate, but to their credit, our smaller local community banks, our credit unions like Connecta and Unify have been stellar. Don's going to go over the list of other folks, but people like Celtic Bank, and US Bank here locally are all open for business, and they will accept anyone who comes through the door. The intent of the program was that every SBA approved bank would review any applicant. The way some banks are addressing it is that they're making it an exclusivity club. That's unfortunate.
And as I had mentioned, it's day 3 of Paycheck Protection. So it'll be a completely different landscape a week from today. And Hanmi Bank and Wallace, we're slowly creating a list to support the link that I put in the chat. So I dropped a few links in there for you. You may want to take a look. Also put the customer service information. And Larry, I think you covered most of
Yeah,
it.
Larry, can you clarify that if you do get a 10,000 grant, you can still apply for PPP, correct?
Yes, yes. PPP does not exclude you. You just cannot use the funds to pay for the same expense. So if you use the $10,000, if you got all of that as your advance, and you use that to pay for salaries, those salaries that were going to be covered under that $10,000 advance, you cannot use those same salaries for under a PPP program. You have to use other salaries or other payroll related expenses.
So the money just goes to one thing at a time.
One particular category, one particular cost at a time. You can have a family of costs, but you just can't pay for the same cost with the same money. You can't double dip.
Right. And then if you get denied for the EIDL loan, do you have to pay the $10,000 grant back?
No. We should, we have been asked to emphasize that you don't automatically get $10,000. Your application will be reviewed and you have the opportunity to be approved for up to $10,000, which will become a grant if you are denied. If you are not denied, it is a loan that must meet the qualified payment criteria in order to be relieved from the obligation to pay.
Great, thank you so much.
So with that, Michelle or Eric?
Yeah, we want to just thank you, Don and Laura and Larry, for the information and for being such a great resource locally. We're fortunate to have PCC and the Small Business Center being such an integral part of our community. And again, I want to thank you for your time. Michelle, did we miss anything on the local front?
So I'd like to encourage everyone to visit the city's website. We do have a lot of information that's helpful for businesses during these times. If you go to the city's homepage, which is cityofpasadena.net, you'll find under the COVID-19 coronavirus section, there's a special tab, and it's COVID-19 information for businesses. And that will take you to a variety of resources, both locally from the state and from the feds, to help you through this. And then in addition, you can sign up for our weekly business briefing where we share information with our business community, all the current happenings, and we try to consolidate everything into one place to make it easier for you.